We go out west at this moment to the legal representative for Nick Diaz, Mr. Jonathan Tweedale. Jonathan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's a very interesting topic that we're going to deal with tonight. The Quebec Athletic Commission, I understand that you're representing Nick Diaz with certain problems that he has that deal with not only the weight issue, but now the drug testing as well. Jonathan, can you just explain to us what the discrepancy was at the weigh-ins before UFC 158?
Well, the rule everywhere in the world for a title fight is that you got to hit the weight or under. So you got to hit, for a welterweight title fight, you got to hit 170 on the dot or under. That's the rule everywhere in the world. As Mark Ratner confirmed when we were dealing with the issue, the weigh-ins in Seattle for Nate, 155, 155.6 wouldn't do it, 155.2 wouldn't do it. It had to be 155. That requirement, that comes from really the UFC, and informs the meaning of what the 170 pounds means in the bout agreement. But the Quebec's actual rule is for a title fight, you got to weigh in at exactly the weight or under as specified in the bout agreement. That's their actual rule. The screwy thing is this video that emerged and prompted a comment and a statement from the Quebec Commission in the absence of any complaint already having been made. It's just the video was so incriminating by itself that it prompted the Quebec Commission to scramble to come up with some kind of explanation for this. So in the video depicting Mike Mersch, the UFC employee, of course the UFC, when it's under an athletic commission, it's required to do what the athletic commission says. So Mersch's hands are tied to a certain extent. He's delivering a message that is a special rule here. It's going to be, they'll ignore the decimal up to 0.9 over is okay. It tells Diaz this right before the fight, right before the weigh-ins are about to start.
Now, if I could, let me just read you the quote, just in case, our listeners haven't seen the video. It's the quote direct from Michael Mersch. He says in the YouTube video, which, by the way, mysteriously has been taken down by the UFC a couple times, citing copyright infringement, which I don't really understand there, but you're the lawyer. Maybe you can explain that to us. But Michael Mersch, a UFC employee, says here, they're going to allow you and George to have an extra hour just in case somebody doesn't make it. But the good news is they don't count the decimal. If you're 170.2, it's 170. If it's 170.9, it's 170. And he calls it kind of an off-the-record type of thing. As long as he's under 171, we should be good, says Michael Mersch to Nick Diaz and, a few guys in his camp. And when was that video taken? Like a couple hours before the weigh-in, right? So saying that at that point is pretty useless.
Less than that. Nick, I think, was already on weight. He was already, I don't think I think he was already at 169.
So what was the point of coming in and telling Nick Diaz that when there's nothing he can really change? It does seem fishy, and it also seems fishy that the UFC has taken that video down. It just makes them seem like they're trying to hide something when they may not be, but it does seem that way when you take a video like that down.
I don't know what you can really infer from that. They've got a team of lawyers busy trying to assert copyright. But I don't know what they're really thinking on that. I think the blame, or the issue here, on the facts that I know it right now, are with on the athletic commission entirely. Mm-hmm. That said, we don't have all the facts yet. But it looks like, first of all, that hour to make weight, that's actually contrary to the regulations that say the opposite, the written rule. Yeah,
and the written rule says you weigh what you weigh on the scale. If you don't make weight the first attempt, that's it.
Right.
You lose. You don't make weight, which is not that's not standard practice in mixed martial arts.
Right.
Standard practice practice for MMA is if you don't make weight, you have 2 hours to make the weight. If you can't do it, then you forfeit a percentage of your purse. But that technically in the rules here in Quebec is not the letter of the law.
Right. That's not even it. But you see, that isn't that big an issue.
Right.
To us, except it shows that they're willing to bend the rules and deviate from the written regulation if it would help in the circumstances. help their hometown guy here in the circumstances, it appears. But the problem is that the last-minute decision to omit the decimal, which Stefan Patry will say isn't the practice in the past. There are lots of counterexamples in the past. The problem is the statement they came out with when they were given an attempt to come clean, having been caught indirectly on this video through Mike Mersch, the statement they made today that they just ignore the decimal is so inadequate. So it's not only did you have the screwy decision on the eve of the weigh-ins, right before the weigh-ins, you then have, when they have a chance to clarify, a statement that, according to Patry, is patently false and is totally contrary to their regulations.
Now, let me
WTF.
Exactly. Let me read to you that statement that the Régie des alcools, des courses et des jeux, the Quebec Athletic Commission for Combat Sports, issued to MMAfighting.com. This is according to the commission. They say, I wish to inform you that during UFC 158, no contestants exceeded the weight determined in their contract. Currently, the Régie does not take into consideration the maximum weight determined by contract when it carries out the weigh-ins before a bout. However, our regulation on combat sports does not take decimals into account. Their consideration is a question of interpretation likely to be debated between the two parties under contract. So what the Régie is basically saying is, no, we don't take decimals into account, which you don't have to listen to Stéphane Patry. You can listen to me or any fighter that has ever fought here in Quebec or anybody in the media that has ever watched fights here in Quebec. I've been covering this sport for several years, and I have seen decimals counted at pretty much every weigh-in I have ever attended. The statement by the Régie that they do not count decimals into the weigh-in is categorically false. It is not true. There is not a shred of truth to it. They have lied about this, and in the past, we have seen them use the decimals as everybody in combat sports does. So the fact that the Régie would put out this statement saying that they don't even use the decimals, that, I think, is the most glaring problem in their defense of what happened at the UFC 158 weigh-ins.
Let me ask you this, which is connected to it. Now, do you believe them when they say in a week's time, yeah, we tested George for steroids, and he was clean?
I'll tell
you. Do you believe them?
Now,
do you believe them now?
Jonathan, I will tell you this. 3 or 4 weeks ago, I had a guy named Matt Casavant, who is a boxing insider here for TSN Radio and knows a lot about the sport of boxing and follows that sport. And he asked the question to me on this program, had I ever witnessed a mixed martial arts fighter test positive for anything in the province of Quebec? And I could not come up with an answer. And he is saying that in the sport of boxing, no one has ever tested positive for anything. And there have been cases with certain athletes where you can definitely suspect, if not know for a fact, that there are substances that they are taking and they are not testing positive for afterwards. So in the sport of boxing, which has been around a lot longer, and I'm not the first one saying this, articles have been written in local newspapers here about this very issue when it comes to boxing. So my colleague on the boxing side asks me on the MMA side, is it the same? And I say, of course it is. No one has ever tested positive for anything here. So if you ask me, you know, do I think that they really tested GSP or Nick or whoever? I'm not sure. And I would have to say probably not.
Well, it sounds like you're saying that Nick really didn't get a fair shot at George under the rules applicable to title fights in the UFC, any fights in the UFC, never mind a title fight. Sounds like you're on board.
What I'm saying is